Recently, a viewer left a comment on one of my videos suggesting I talk about how a non-believer should talk to the missionaries. Welcome, friends, enemies, and everyone in between, to my channel, The Masked Mormon. I am in fact the Masked Mormon.
Why are you wearing a mask? Were you burned by acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
If you are returning, welcome back. But if this is your first time here, I am a Mormon who used to believe in the truth claims of the Mormon Church. I did it all. I was baptized, I went on a mission, I attended BYU, I was married in the temple, and all the rest of it. I truly believed in the claims of Mormonism. Now I explore some of the implications of Mormon theology, its culture, and some of my own personal experiences, and talk about it on the internet with you fine viewers. The missionaries are perhaps the most visible representation of the Mormon Church. A pair of young men or women wearing black name tags, knocking on doors in an effort to convince people to join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They serve for a period of 2 years for young men and 18 months for young women. They're usually far from home, sometimes for the first time in their lives. They are in a highly controlled environment where every aspect of their lives is dictated by a series of rules that tells them when to wake up, when to eat, what to wear, who they can talk to, when they can sleep, and everything else. Add on to that a ton of cultural and peer pressure. Now, I've previously done a video where I discuss whether or not a Mormon mission is a cult. Spoiler alert, all signs point to yes. A Mormon mission is a rite of passage for a young man. He is taught from the time that he is a young child that he is expected to serve a mission. Recently, Apostle David Bednar and a Utah State president taught young men that they really don't have a choice in the matter. They, somehow covenanted to serve a mission when they chose to be baptized at 8 years old. Now, apparently, young children are not able to enter into legal contracts, but they can enter into eternal agreements. I covered this in my video about the death of agency. Young women, though not obligated to serve missions, have been going on them more and more in recent years, especially since the age for women to serve was reduced from 21 down to 19. Missions can be an important life event for many young Mormons. Young men are often not considered worthy of a marriage partner unless they have returned from a mission. Even if you are a convert to the church in your teens or early 20s, there is a huge cultural pressure to go on a mission. At least, that was true for me. I attended BYU intent on studying physics and hopefully going on a lot of dates. I did not intend on serving a mission. I had only been a member of the church for about 2 years. But because I didn't want to go on a mission, I was considered untouchable. I wasn't considered a worthy potential romantic partner. And there were so many messages at church and elsewhere that laid the pressure on pretty thick that I was still expected to go on a mission. Now, I eventually caved to that pressure and served a mission in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, it ended up being a pretty okay experience. I served in leadership callings, I met some great people, I had some good companions, some of which I still keep in contact today. But it didn't ultimately help me in my life. I didn't learn a new language that could be used elsewhere, or pick up any skills that would later serve me in life. I went on a mission in my 20s. I had already been living on my own for quite a few years, so knew how to take care of myself. Once I returned from my mission, it was like no one really cared anymore. I had checked that box, and everything just kind of moved on. But I know what it's like to be a missionary. I know what it's like to knock on doors day after day after day. What it's like to get frustrated by the dogs constantly trying to bite you, people yelling at you or throwing things at you, the exhaustion from 16-hour days, dealing with the heat and the cold, the excitement of Preparation Day Eve. I don't know if you remember that at all. Reading the same things over and over. The little victories when someone invites you in. what it's like to see behind the curtain of church leadership, the excitement when someone gets baptized, the little inside jokes that you have with the other missionaries, and all of that. So, now that we no longer believe in the truth claims of the church, how should we talk to the missionaries? Now, I feel that the commenter that left this suggestion would like me to discuss ways to talk to the missionaries that can lead them out of the church. But I'm not really going to do that. Now, I will give some topic ideas that can lead to some thought-provoking discussions with the missionaries, but the purpose in talking with them should not be to try to get them to leave the church. Why not? Well, first of all, it usually just ends up backfiring. In a perfectly rational world, people who encounter evidence that challenges their beliefs would evaluate the evidence and then adjust their beliefs accordingly. However, what usually happens is when people encounter information that should cause them to doubt their beliefs, they will reject this evidence and strengthen their support for the original belief. This is fittingly called the backfire effect. This happens because when a person comes across information that challenges their beliefs in some way, they will feel threatened, and they will experience a series of negative emotions, especially if the belief that is in question is crucial to their identity or self-concept. And as a defense mechanism, they will reject the challenging information and reinforce the original belief. Additionally, it can lead the person to view you as a threat to them, either rupturing the relationship or making further discussions on the topic very difficult. Second, it may be unethical to try to get a missionary to stop believing. You don't necessarily know their background or what initiating a faith crisis would lead to. They may have a happy family that is firmly entrenched in the church, and if the missionary leaves, it can end up throwing a grenade into their family dynamic. They still have to be part of their family dynamic when they return home. They may know you for only a few weeks or a couple of months, but they will have a relationship with their families for the rest of their lives. And if they are not ready to start questioning, any efforts to get them to question their faith can cause a lot of lasting issues that you won't have to deal with afterwards. It's kind of like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. The directive prohibits interfering with the natural development of other civilizations. Its purpose is to protect unprepared civilizations from being introduced to knowledge before they're ready. Now, that isn't to say that you can't probe and ask questions to see where they are. And there is no reason why you can't share with them the reasons why you no longer believe. But I think intention really matters. Mission story time. I had been out for a little less than 6 months, so I had some experience, but was still somewhat green. I had heard some anti-talking points throughout my time in the church and on the mission. My companion and I were out knocking on doors early one evening, and a woman and her husband opened the door and invited us in. Initially, we were excited because that seldom happened. We were trying to go into our spiel about the Book of Mormon and the Restoration, and they cut us off and proceeded to tell us that they know that we're in a cult and to try to convince us that we need to leave our missions. They essentially tried to rescue us. We listened patiently, just wanting to get out of there. They tell us, quote, "We know you probably can't, but if you can get away from the other missionaries, you can come here and stay with us until you can find a way home." I remember thinking, well, I can leave anytime I wanted. I was, to some extent, touched by how concerned they were for us. But on the other hand, I shook my head because, obviously, they didn't understand the importance of what we were doing. Now, we left on good terms, but it ultimately entrenched me into the mission culture that much more. Another mission story. In another area, I was training a new missionary. We were finishing up for the day and heading home. We passed these two guys who beckoned us over. They asked us what we were doing. We said, "We're talking to people about Jesus." And they said, "Well, we're people and we like talking about Jesus." So we stopped to chat. It became very apparent very quickly that they were ministers at a nearby evangelical church. And we got into the classic Mormon evangelical argument about faith and works, and whether we were actually saved or not. Now, I asked a series of questions walking down this logical path of what it took to be saved, what we needed to know about the nature of Jesus, the mechanics of what it took to be saved, etc. And they would respond with their talking points about once saved, always saved, etc. I was ultimately prepared for each issue that they brought up. In the end, I concluded that, by their definitions, we were saved. We were just working too hard. Now, they didn't have a retort, and the conversation ended, and we went home. All that to say is that the missionaries will usually have some sort of backup argument or apologetic that they will draw on to try to refute the issues that you bring up. Though I no longer believe, I'm actually still kind of proud of that exchange. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to go more into detail about that story. Well, I probably will anyway. There's a series of mission stories I want to share at some point. Those ministers and that couple ultimately had an agenda, and we could pick up on it. And the indoctrination ultimately runs pretty deep. Unless the missionary is already questioning, it can be hard to have discussions like this with them. Again, I am not saying not to have difficult or interesting discussions with the missionaries, but how you approach it really matters. The first step is to be kind. Though they are adults, they are fresh out of the box. Still, essentially, kids. The men were likely in high school just a few months previous, and the women aren't much removed themselves. They are in a high-demand environment. They have a lot of pressure to be obedient to the voluminous missionary rules and to meet whatever numbers objective their mission president sets out for them. Whether that is the number of discussions they are trying to have or the number of baptisms they are reaching for. On top of that, they are constantly being rejected and encountering people who don't want what they are offering. Day in and day out, it can be very tedious and demoralizing. So remember, they are people, little more than kids. In fact, they are likely still teenagers. So please, be kind, invite them in if you are able, offer them something to drink or to eat. You don't necessarily have to talk shop with them. Let them have a few minutes to decompress. If you can't or don't want them in your home, still try to be kind to them. Now, it is true that missionaries can at times be pushy or arrogant, but for the most part, they are just trying to do what they think their God wants them to do. Second, if you do get into church talk, do so without the agenda of trying to get them to leave their missions or the church. By all means, be honest about your experiences or where your beliefs are now. You had a problem with Joseph Smith practicing polygamy and marrying underage girls? Sure, let them know that's what caused you to leave, or whatever the case may be. But don't give them a copy of the CES letter or start asking, "Did you know?" types of questions. They will see through this as an attempt to rattle their cage and will likely elicit the backfire effect. Instead, have an honest conversation with them. Use I statements. I believe. I came to realize. I felt like this when. It's a lot less threatening when you are talking about your own personal experiences. If you do want to discuss something specific, keep it to one or two topics. There's no need to unload a ton of issues on them. They will just turn off, or the backfire effect might be triggered. Stay focused on the issue at hand. Like I said, don't jump around. There is likely more than enough to talk about with that one specific topic with them. Returning to polygamy, if that's what really concerns you, especially with how Joseph Smith practiced it, stay on that topic. Talk about how it makes you feel. Humanize it. A lot of times when these topics are brought up, we have such a distance from them that they don't seem like they were that bad or that they were that real. You can ask how they would feel if any of the girls were their sister or their mother. If it's a sister missionary, you can ask how she would feel if she were in the position of Helen Mar Kimball at 14. Would she agree to marry a man that was over 20 years her senior, who is already legally married to another woman? Now, if presentism gets brought up, you can remind them that it was kept a secret from the wider public because polygamy wasn't approved of by society. Some of the attacks on Joseph Smith were due to his practice of polygamy and his indiscretions with younger women. Humanize, humanize, humanize. Sometimes you may not want to go down that road. You may want to keep it lighter. In those instances, I like to ask open-ended questions when I'm talking to the missionaries. Now that usually leads to some pretty thought-provoking discussions. I realize they will likely keep their belief, but I may introduce a bit of nuance that they can then reflect on later in life, or that they can find a new way of looking at something that they have only thought about one way since they were in primary. My main go-to is asking them what their least favorite scripture in the Book of Mormon is. This was the topic of the last talk I gave at church, which I also discussed in a previous video, so check it out if you're interested. They will usually hem and haw, but I will hold their feet to the fire a bit. To help break the ice, I will share mine. But the key when dealing with them is not to dwell on the negative aspect of said scripture, because, backfire effect. You have to redirect to something that can be seen as something that's more faith-affirming, even while it casts a doubt on the veracity of the book's divine nature. You might pick the racism that's present in the book. You might bring up the skin of blackness and the curse that God apparently placed on the Lamanites. But then you can turn to the story of Ammon and Lamoni and how they were each able to overcome their own racism and come to love each other to the point of protecting the other with their lives. You could bring up the story where Nephi beheads an unconscious man and takes his clothes. Then you can talk about how the Lamanites laid down and buried their weapons and turned away from violence. These are topics that can lead to some pretty in-depth and fulfilling conversations with the missionaries. Each time I have done this, it has been a very pleasant and fulfilling experience for all involved. They may come away looking at their sacred book in a new way that may help them learn to be more critical in the future or have a more nuanced view of the various stories that they see in the scriptures. Another take that can be used is something called street epistemology. Epistemology is the examination of how someone develops their beliefs and whether the methods of coming to those beliefs are valid. Street epistemology is a set of non-confrontational conversational techniques for discussing a strongly held belief. It's designed to promote thoughtful reflection and open-mindedness in the participant regarding their belief. If you want to see examples of street epistemology in action, you can check out Anthony Magnabosco's YouTube channel. There are several episodes where he talks to missionaries or to TBMs. Now, this method doesn't concentrate on the beliefs themselves, but how valid the method of adopting it was. It doesn't go into truth claims or anything like that. Examples of questions street epistemology asks are, something like, on the scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you that your belief is true? And what would it take to move that value up or down? Anthony is very talented, and the conversations he has with people are very respectful, deep, and thought-provoking. People will often come back to him and tell him that they ruminated over their discussion for days afterwards. So, those are my suggestions on how to talk to the missionaries. And remember, first and foremost, be kind. They're someone's kid away from home for the first time. But, what are your thoughts? Are there some other ways of talking to the missionaries that you would suggest? What are some interesting conversations that you've had with the missionaries? Let me know down in the comments. If you like what I do, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.